hills above Barcelona, there was once a dangerous yet beautiful track, with cigarette sponsors painted on every banner, and airboxes the size of skyscrapers charging around every bend. I don't think there could be a more perfect picture of F1 in the mid-1970s. One circuit from this period that has always amazed me was Montjuic Park. In some eyes, it's more stunning than Monaco, and is undoubtedly faster. This circuit has a great amount of history, but there's one particular event that comes to mind, full of chaos and tragedy, but also holds a piece of F1 history that has yet to be beaten. So let me tell you about the 1975 Montjuic Grand Prix and one of the most remarkable drivers, Lella Lombardi. Going over Rasante, down towards Miramar, turn 1. It's all a bit tight off the start. I'm just going to let them go first. Up the inside of Donahue in the Penske. Tight towards Rosaleda. Taking 2 more spots as we go. Left at the Greek Theatre. Diaz is always trickier than you think. Lella Lombardi. What can we say about the Tigress of Turin? Firstly, that she was actually from a town called Frugarolo, closer to Genoa, but who doesn't love a catchy nickname? But more importantly, Lella was technically minded, able to look after the car, and above all, fast. As she moved up through Italy's single-seater series, she became successful, becoming the champion of the Italian Formula 850 series in 1971. By 1974, she was competing in Formula 5000, finishing 4th as James Hunt's teammate and close competitor. And now we're up to 16th. In another step up, she became the first woman to qualify for the Race of Champions in that same year. Taking advantage of our brakes here, taking the Brabham and more. Finally, in 1975, the Tigress got the opportunity to race for the March F1 team. By this time, March's early competitive promise had flatlined. Money was tight after splitting their ambitions between their stellar F2 championship and their middling performances in F1, but they still remained committed to the top level, both as a producer of cars for customers like Frank Williams and as a fully fledged racing team. Coming to Spain, the Ferraris looked strong, but the 1975 season was not yet dominated by Lauda and Regazzoni's Ferraris. All of their first 3 races were won by different teams, McLaren, Brabham and Tyrrell. Sliding around the last corner. Okay, our first proper lap is a 1:39. Montjuic had already hosted F1 and F2 races. It was a tricky, demanding, but well-loved track. Mistakes by drivers or their mechanics had big consequences. Famously, Jochen Rindt and Graham Hill violently hit the barriers because their new rear wings broke away over the Rasante jump. Sliding down to Rosaleda. Ooh, Regazzoni's had a bad time. Dark clouds were forming over the race weekend. The cars did not scream through the streets during practice. Instead, Emerson Fittipaldi, walked the circuit with the drivers, pointing out highly unsafe and badly fixed guardrails and debris nets. This was a huge problem. In recent memory, 3 drivers, 3 friends, had died in part due to faulty barriers. Taking the inside, Peterson's bounced me. As well as this, Mario Andretti realised that they would be liable for any spectator injuries under Spanish law. So the drivers' union, the GPDA, held a meeting alongside the non-association races. The drivers refused to race. As the drivers locked themselves away, the F1 paddock took to action. The team bosses and engineers alike, as well as a few Spanish workmen, took to the 2.5-mile circuit to fix the Armco walls. Apparently, one of the Embassy Hill mechanics jokingly marked their section of repaired barriers near the Resante jump, writing, quote, "Don't crash here, please." For a while, the drivers held the ultimate power to refuse to race if they thought it was unsafe. But the drivers' opposition meant that Formula One's contract with the Royal Club of Catalonia would not be honoured, and would force the Spanish to start legal and financial consequences. Apparently to prove that they were serious, about 100 civil guard soldiers entered the stadium where the teams and trucks were paddocked, armed with rifles. Ultimately, the drivers backed down. They couldn't fight back against that, so they gave in, and qualifying eventually took place on a somewhat safer track. For Lombardi, this exciting and tricky track was only her second ever race in F1. In the older 751 model, she qualified 24th of 26, nearly 7 seconds behind Lauda's Ferrari in P1. Meanwhile, her teammate, Vittorio Brambilla, placed 5th in the newer Mark III March. Okay, that's a 1:28.6. That's my fastest lap so far. And able to take Depailler because of it. It wasn't the most promising start for Lella, but just surviving this circuit was to become the battle. Come race day, everyone was ready to take part, except for Emerson Fittipaldi, who flew back to his home in Switzerland in defiance. The revs raised and adrenaline took over as the drivers finally accelerated towards turn 1. But just like me, Lombardi had a fairly slow start, remaining towards the back. Surprisingly for a tight street track, being at the rear was ultimately safer than being at the front. Leaping over the Resante jump and towards the Miramar hairpin, both Ferraris collided. Clay Regazzoni's car slowly limped on, but Niki was taken out entirely following a domino of collisions stemming from Brambilla in his march. In the scrum, more cars made further contact with each other before testing out the barriers around the rest of the track, bouncing between the Armco and their fellow racers. Andretti's car was so damaged that his issues largely cancelled each other out. Wilson Fittipaldi retired discreetly in the pits whilst Merzario just gave up on circuit, lit up a cigarette from a pack he had taped into his car and walked back to the pits. Getting too close to Jarier, chaos continued. Jody Scheckter's Tyrrell had an engine failure, making oil pool on the track and causing Hunt in first place, as well as Alan Jones and Mark Donoghue, to all spin out of the race. Around the same time, Andretti and John Watson in P2 and 3 were also forced to retire. This left the Embassy Hill of Wolf Stommelen in first place for the first time in both his career and the team's history, quickly followed by Carlos Pache's Brabham and Peterson's Lotus. As the race progressed, things still didn't settle down. Jochen Mass was elevated to third after Peterson went 3 wide, overtaking a back marker and crashing into the barriers. Whilst all this madness was happening, Lella had a quietly confident race. Sure, she had quite a slow start, but by keeping her head down and staying out of trouble, she made her way through the back, into the mid-pack, and towards her teammate, but there were still a few cars between her and any championship points. 2 more laps to go. Can I get past these shadows? Well, I've got one, and he'll have to fight the Tyrrell behind now. Along came the infamous lap 26. Rolf Stommelen was leading with Carlos Pache right behind him. As Rolf started his lap, coming past the pits and over the Rasante jump at around 150 miles an hour, his rear wing suddenly separated. The abrupt lack of downforce on the rear launched the car across the road and hit the barriers on the left. The arm coat did not collapse, but it did bounce the car across the road. Pache couldn't avoid the collision and was taken out of the race. But far worse, Stommelen's car continued, hitting the barriers on the right, skating along its top rail, taking down a lamppost, Marshall station and a length of wire catch net. Rolf survived the incident with major injuries. However, 4 or 5 others were killed, and another 9 or 10 others injured. The barrier the car hit was the section his Embassy Hill team had repaired. One more lap? Can we drive like Lella and take 6th place? Into the hairpin? Such an event was truly awful. But if it wasn't for the Embassy Hill team's work on track, alongside the car's new fire-preventing fuel valves, it could have been far, far worse, potentially in the same levels of the Le Mans disaster 2 decades prior. It's also an unfortunate echo of the previous Rindt and Hill incidents, and a precursor to Stommelen's later crash at Riverside, which was similarly caused by a collapsed rear wing that ultimately took his life. The race continued until lap 29, where out of 25 starters, just 10 finished. Jochen Mass's McLaren was declared the winner, followed by Jackie X and Carlos Reutemann. It was Mass's only win in Formula 1. The Tigress of Turin survived. She returned to the pits in 6th position and in line to gain a championship point. But like everyone else, she was only awarded half as much, as for the first time in F1 history, the race was stopped before its scheduled end. Alright, after 8 laps we've matched Lella. We've moved from the back all the way to 6th place, with our teammate Brambella just ahead of us. After 43 minutes in Barcelona, a lot had changed in the world of Formula 1. F1 embarked on another safety march, and circuits were made safer and safer. Also importantly, this weekend was one of the last that drivers held much power to refuse to race, even if drivers saw a risk to life. Instead, it was the constructors, including Bernie Ecclestone, who became the ones with the power to decide a weekend. So far, Lella Lombardi is the only female driver in F1 history to finish in the points, all owing to her skill, a pinch of chance, and a trouble-free run that attracted little attention against the weekend's chaos. Lella didn't stay in F1 for too much longer. Spain was her high point in the series. She performed very well at the German Grand Prix at the Nordschleife, achieving a 7th place, but she never scored in F1 again, in part due to significant damage to her rear bulkhead, a caused snap oversteer. But ultimately, she really found her footing in sports car racing, taking many podiums. She came 2nd in class in a Lancia Stratos at Le Mans, and winning 3 6-hour races at home in Italy. She continues to inspire many people to race. She wasn't the first woman to drive a Formula 1 car, but she was the first to score. But to the Tigress, those kind of statistics didn't matter. All she cared about was driving fast and being the first to take the checkered flag. In 1975, on the hills above Barcelona, there was infamy and controversy. Safety was forgotten, power was shifted, and the worst happened. On a very dark day at Montjuic, Lella Lombardi's charge to the front was a bright moment, forever etched into F1's history. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning about Lella, Montjuic, and Formula 1 as a whole in 1975. I'm looking forward to sharing my next stories with you. I've just received some new books for a new video that I've been working on. It'll take a moment to read what I need to for that project. In the meantime, I'm planning to start a series about a classic championship that you all may enjoy. So until then, thanks for watching. I've been Historic Sim Racer, and I'll see you next time.